Venezuela, a country sitting on the world's largest proven oil reserves. So why has it faced such intense pressure from the United States? The story is complex, and it's not just about oil, but oil is a huge part of it. Let's peel back the layers and understand what's really going on between these two nations. For decades, the relationship between the U.S. and Venezuela was relatively stable, built on a foundation of oil. Venezuela was a reliable supplier to the American market. But things started to change dramatically in 1999 when Hugo Chávez came to power. Chávez launched what he called the Bolivarian Revolution, a socialist movement aimed at redistributing the country as oil wealth to the poor through social programs in health, education, and housing. This move was a direct challenge to the old order. Chávez nationalized key industries, including parts of the oil sector that were previously in the hands of foreign corporations, including American ones. He used the oil revenue to fund his social agenda and to build alliances with other left-leaning governments in Latin America, openly opposing U.S. influence in the region. Washington saw this not just as an economic threat to its corporate interests, but as a geopolitical challenge to its dominance in the Western Hemisphere. The U.S. government began to frame Chávez as an authoritarian leader who was undermining democracy. Tensions escalated, and this set the stage for a long-term strategy of pressure against Venezuela. After Chávez's death in 2013, his successor, Nicolás Maduro, inherited this tense relationship, along with a host of economic problems. Venezuela's economy, which was heavily dependent on oil exports, began to collapse when global oil prices plummeted in 2014. The government's economic mismanagement and over-reliance on a single commodity made the situation worse. Hyperinflation soared, and shortages of food, medicine, and basic goods became widespread. This created a severe humanitarian crisis, with millions of Venezuelans leaving the country. This is where the U.S. strategy intensified. The American government, under various administrations, imposed a series of crippling economic sanctions. The official reason was to pressure the Maduro government to restore democracy and human rights. These sanctions targeted Venezuela's state-owned oil company, PDVSA, as well as its financial sector and key government officials. The goal was to cut off the Maduro government's main source of revenue, oil. The U.S. prohibited American companies from doing business with Venezuela's oil sector and pressured other countries to do the same. This effectively created an economic blockade, making it incredibly difficult for Venezuela to sell its oil or import necessary goods. Critics of this policy argue that these broad sanctions have been a form of collective punishment, hurting the Venezuelan people more than the government. They claim the sanctions have worsened the humanitarian crisis by preventing the import of food, medicine, and equipment needed for essential services like water and electricity. Proponents, however, maintain that the pressure is necessary to force a political transition away from what they see as a dictatorship. So where does the idea of the U.S. wanting to run Venezuela and take its oil come from? It's rooted in the history of U.S. intervention in Latin America and comments from U.S. officials themselves. For example, former National Security Advisor John Bolton publicly stated that it would be economically beneficial for American oil companies to invest in and produce Venezuela's oil capabilities. Such statements fuel the narrative that the U.S. goal isn't just about democracy, but also about regaining control over Venezuela's vast oil reserves. Think about it from a strategic perspective. Venezuela has over 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, more than Saudi Arabia. Much of this is heavy crude, which is more difficult and expensive to refine. But with the right technology and investment, something American companies have in abundance, it represents a massive energy resource right in America's backyard. At a time of global energy uncertainty, having access to or influence over such a large reserve would be a huge strategic advantage for the United States. It would reduce reliance on oil from the Middle East and other less stable regions. The idea is that a friendly U.S.-aligned government in Venezuela would likely open its oil sector back up to foreign investment, particularly from American firms. This would not only be profitable for those companies, but would also secure a long-term energy supply for the U.S. The U.S. has also supported the Venezuelan opposition, led by figures like Juan Guaido. In 2019, the U.S. and dozens of other countries recognized Guaido as the legitimate interim president of Venezuela, even though Maduro remained in control of the state's institutions, including the military. This was a direct attempt to sideline Maduro and install a government that would be more favorable to U.S. interests. This political maneuvering, combined with economic sanctions, forms a comprehensive strategy of pressure. However, this plan hasn't exactly worked out as intended. The Maduro government has managed to hold on to power, partly by seeking support from other global powers like Russia and China. These countries have provided Venezuela with loans, investments, and political backing, helping to counteract some of the U.S. pressure. In a way, Venezuela has become a chessboard for a larger geopolitical game between the U.S., Russia, and China. So, is the U.S. plan to run Venezuela and tap its oil? It's not as simple as a direct invasion to seize oil fields. The modern approach is more subtle and complex. It involves a combination of economic warfare through sanctions, political support for the opposition, and diplomatic isolation. The end goal appears to be a regime change that would install a government friendly to U.S. economic and strategic interests. This new government would likely privatize state assets and welcome back foreign oil companies, effectively allowing the U.S. to tap into those reserves through its corporations. It's a strategy of achieving economic and geopolitical goals through indirect means rather than direct military force. The situation is a powerful reminder of how geopolitics, national interests, and natural resources are deeply intertwined. The story of U.S.-Venezuela relations isn't just about two countries. It's about a global power seeking to maintain its influence and secure its energy future, and a smaller nation struggling to control its own destiny and its most valuable resource. The human cost in all of this is immense, with ordinary Venezuelans caught in the middle of this high-stakes geopolitical conflict. As the world's energy landscape continues to shift, Venezuela and its oil will undoubtedly remain at the center of international attention. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into complex global issues. See you next time.